Adi-lila, chapter 9, texts 49 and 50. Mahamadaka prema phala peta barikaya Matila sakala loka hashe nachigaya Mahamadaka prema phala peta barikaya Matila sakala loka hashe nachigaya Mahamadaka, great intoxicant. Prema phala, this fruit of love of God. Peta, belly. Bari, filling. Kaya, let them eat. Atila, became mad. Sakala loka, all the people in general. Hashe, laugh. Nache, dance. Gaya, chant. We'll do text 50. Keha, some of them. Gadi, Yaya, roll on the floor. Keha, some of them. Ta, certainly. Hunkara, hum very loudly. Deki, seeing this. Anandita, gladdened. Hana, becoming. So, Hashe, smiles. Malakara, the great gardener. Translations. The fruit of love of Godhead distributed by Caitanya Mahaprabhu is such a great intoxicant that anyone who eats it, filling his belly, immediately becomes maddened by it. And automatically he chants, dances, laughs and enjoys. When Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, the great gardener, sees that people are chanting, dancing and laughing, and that some of them are rolling on the floor and some of them are making loud humming sounds, he smiles with great pleasure. Please repeat. The fruit of love of Godhead distributed by Caitanya Mahaprabhu is such a great intoxicant that anyone who eats it, filling his belly, immediately becomes maddened by it. And automatically he chants, dances, laughs and enjoys. When Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, the great gardener, sees the people are chanting, dancing and laughing, and that some of them are rolling on the floor, and some are making loud humming sounds, he smiles with great pleasure. Krishna Kirtan, can you make a loud humming sound? Anyone want to try a loud humming sound? Oh, that's good. That's good. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. This attitude of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu is very important for persons engaged in the Hare Krishna movement of Krishna consciousness. In every centre of our institution, ISKCON, we have arranged for a love feast every Sunday. And when we actually see people come to our centre, chant, dance, take prasad, become jubilant and purchase books, we know that certainly Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu is always present in such transcendental activities, and he is very pleased and satisfied. Therefore, the members of ISKCON must increase this movement more and more, according to the principles that we are presently trying to execute. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, thus being pleased, will smilingly glance upon them, bestowing his favour, and the movement will be successful. Amagyanatimanandasya gananjana salakaya chakshu unmanitam jena tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nivasesha Shunyavari Paskachad Zatarne. So loud humming sounds. Of course, we know in our Bengal, it's very popular amongst the Vaishnavis during festivals and ecstatic kirtans, ululating, where, and of course, some of our local ladies have Sri Hari Bhakti, she likes to ululate, and also Sadhana. These are long-term residents of Sridhar Mayapur, and they have also learned that very auspicious, considered very auspicious when the ladies ululate during kirtan and festivals in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So here we have some other ecstatic symptoms, loud humming sounds, rolling on the floor, dancing, laughing. So these are, of course, all symptoms of transcendental ecstasy, which come from participating in Mahaprabhu's wonderful pastimes, the Sankirtan movement. So there's a wonderful verse. Ramante yogino anante satchidananda chidatmani iti rama padena param brahma vidiyate. That the mystics or bhakti yogis derive unlimited transcendental pleasure from the Supreme Absolute Truth. Therefore, the Supreme Absolute Truth, the personality of Godhead, is known as Rama. So, Srila Prabhupada instructed some of his disciples who had already formed a travelling padayatra party in India during His Divine Grace's time, and Prabhupada, where they were taking large Neemwood Gaunitai deities, village to village, town to town in India, and holding Harinam Sankirtan festivals. And Prabhupada encouraged them especially to go to South India, because he said this is what the Vaishnavas in South India are missing out on, especially in the Sri and Madhva Sampradayas. They're missing out on this very blissful emphasis on Harinam Sankirtan and the sublime teachings of Caitanya Mahaprabhu, special mercy which comes from worshipping Gaur-Nitai. So, of course, they did that and popularized throughout South India, so much so now that ISKCON has many important branches, even in some of the great seats of learning, such as Tirupati, where ISKCON has an enormous temple center, one of the great seats of the Sri Sampradaya. Is right there, just at the bottom of the hill, Tirumala, the abode of Lord Venkateshwar. Some of us have been fortunate enough to visit that temple in days gone by. So, Lord Balaji. So, the first year that Srila Prabhupada was in America, he was observing the good people of the USA and noting, for example, on their currency, "In God we trust." Now, in the past 55 years, that may have changed a little bit. Now, perhaps more prominent is, rather than Almighty God, the Almighty Dollar we trust, which has become not only in the great country of USA, but all over the world as Kali Yuga progresses. But still, Prabhupada noted that at least the founding fathers of the United States, "In God we trust," was their mantra, you could say, or their motto, because they were all God-fearing persons. And Prabhupada also noted that the good people of the US worked very hard on the whole, but on either Saturdays or Sundays they would attend synagogue or church and give some glorification to the Supreme Lord in their own ways, and then there would be a big feast. So Prabhupada struck on this idea, spiritual genius as he is, that let's do something similar. We will also hold Sunday Love Feast, as he's wonderfully describing here in this purport. And that Sunday Love Feast, one may think this is a curious name, Love Feast, but Prabhupada is basing the Sunday Feast, which we normally have when it's not a worldwide pandemic, based on the teaching. Actually, it's mantra 4 of Upadeshamrita, Srila Rupa Goswami's wonderful little handbook on Krishna consciousness. Dadati pratigrinanti guyam akyati prichati bhunkte bojayate chaiva sadvidim priti lakshanam. Offering gifts in charity and accepting charitable gifts in return. Revealing one's mind in confidence and inquiring confidentially. Offering prasad and accepting prasad. These are the 6 symptoms of love shared by one devotee and another. So this was Prabhupada's great merciful offering to the good people all over the world, that inviting the general public with no discrimination, you come and we will serve you, we will offer you gifts of love in the form of opulent prasadam, a little philosophy, and blissful kirtan. As always, usually sometime during our Sunday feasts or festivals, there is an arati ceremony, which is very wonderful to see. And often we do dramatical presentations, and it goes on and on and on. So these are wonderful gifts which the devotees offer to the general public. And of course, if people become spiritually enlivened, they can reciprocate by giving some time or some monetary contribution like that. In this way, things go on very nicely. So, and Prabhupada did say that his purports, his writing, commentaries on the cream of all Vedic literatures were his personal ecstasies. So when Prabhupada wrote something as he has done here, it's considered profoundly significant. Similarly, in Melbourne, when Prabhupada was invited to speak at one Catholic seminary and monastery, the abbot, who was about Prabhupada's age, in his late 70s, he asked Srila Prabhupada what was his meditation, and Prabhupada said, "My writing." So, and Prabhupada even joked one time that when I'm gone, so many devotees will say, Prabhupada said this, Prabhupada said that, but what I really said is in my books. And of course, in his lectures, which many of us, I'm sure, are very fond of listening to, and which we saw and heard, more importantly, just a couple of days ago on Ekadashi. And of course, this is the family business of the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, publishing, printing, and distributing transcendental literatures. So, in Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita, he gives what may appear to be making an obvious statement, that the impetus for any type of activity is the pleasure one derives from it. And the example is given in the mundane realm of married couples, householders, working very hard out of love and affection for one another and their children, because one derives a great deal of pleasure in that realm. And so that inspires one to go to work and to earn money, to provide all the comforts of life for one's family members. And one gets a great deal of happiness from that. So similarly, in the spiritual realm, we see that there is wonderful reciprocation between Krishna and his aspiring devotees. there is bliss. And there is happiness, which is unimaginable for non-devotees, but it's hard to describe in words, but it has to be experienced oneself. One has to take the plunge, as they say. Just like a bottle of honey, you won't actually enjoy the sweet taste of the honey by just touching the outside of the jar. You have to take the lid off and actually put your finger in the honey, offer it first to Krishna, and then enjoy it. Similarly, another flaw in Mayavad philosophy is, would you rather be the honey or taste the honey? The aspiration of some impersonalists is to become God or one with God, but that is flawed in the sense that it's much more relishable to taste the sweetness of love of God, the reciprocation with the Supreme Person through bhakti, and only bhakti. So, and of course that's what we're being offered by the kindness of Caitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Nityananda Prabhu. This wonderful process now spread all over the world. In the late 60s, Prabhupada was on a morning walk with just a few young devotees somewhere in California. Dinabandhu Prabhu was on the walk. He recalls this incident. And there was one very young devotee who just moved into the temple a few months before. And on the morning walk, he got an opportunity he thought, try and impress Srila Prabhupada with how, since moving in the temple, he was completely denying himself any type of pleasure. He thought this was the way of spiritual life, to be very austere and to completely negate any type of happiness or pleasure. So rather than being impressed, Prabhupada became very concerned for this new devotee, and even stopped his morning walk and quizzed this young devotee. First of all, he said, that's not our philosophy. Our philosophy is to enjoy. And this was new. This was news for the slightly older devotees on the morning walk. Oh, Prabhupada's saying something different here. Our business is to enjoy. So Prabhupada then asked, were you at the Kirtan last night? And the young devotee said, yes, Prabhupada. Well, that was not enjoyable? Oh, yes, Prabhupada. The lectures my older disciples are giving in this temple, that is not pleasurable to you? Oh, yes, Prabhupada, I'm learning so much. Your older disciples are very knowledgeable. So that is real enjoyment, Prabhupada said. And the prasadam in this temple, it is not delicious and nutritious. Oh, yes, Prabhupada. Very. So Prabhupada said, this is real enjoyment. This is the enjoyment of human beings, not the enjoyment of cats and dogs. So, of course, that is why bhakti, unless we're getting some taste, especially a higher taste, the famous param drisva nivartante, the higher taste of spiritual happiness, not possible to just give up the lower tastes. So, and of course, that is what Prabhupada very mercifully has given all of us. Some of us, I'm sure, many of us have watched the wonderful film by Yadubha and Vishaka Prabhus on the life of Srila Prabhupada. One thing which really struck me, which I'd never heard before, and I noted it because Prabhupada was actually speaking personally. And in one point there, he makes the statement that his mission was to see everyone become happy. And he cited, for example, in the material world, some people become happy by exploiting at the expense of many other people who are very unhappy. For example, employers of a large corporation may pay their workers only a minimal salary and make them work very, very hard under great stress and anxiety. or in ancient times, kings and queens could be very merciless to their subjects. They may be enjoying a high life, but most of the people are suffering. So Prabhupada said, my mission is to see everyone become happy, regardless of rich man, poor man. So wonderful, merciful nature of saintly persons. Paradukkha dukhi. They're unhappy for the unhappiness of others, and they try to rectify that. And of course we know in spiritual life, in the beginning, it may be a little bitter, the medicine. Krishna acknowledges that to Arjuna. He says that those who are on the spiritual path, spiritual practices in the beginning may be bitter like poison, but in the end they're very nectarine. The opposite for a very sensually inclined person, in the beginning that sensual gratification is delightful, it's ambrosial, nectarine, but in many cases at the end it's bitter like poison. And Bhagavatam gives some very graphic examples. For example, an old man may see a young man enjoying, laughing, joking with his consort, a beautiful young woman. Similarly, the young girl is enjoying the company of her boyfriend. And an old man might think, oh, when I was young, I also had a beautiful young wife, and I used to enjoy it like that, but now I have this old, frail body. Woe is me. So, but spiritual life, of course, if practiced nicely, becomes more and more blissful. I met some devotees once, a long time ago. They were a married couple when they joined the Krishna consciousness movement, and like most married couples, they hoped to have 1 or 2 children, but children were never coming. So when they joined the temple, they started going to India regularly. And as happens on the wonderful ISKCON grapevine, they heard about one Ayurvedic Kaviraj somewhere in India from some other householders whose speciality was helping couples have children, whereas before they had been unable. So they went and saw this Kaviraj, and like all good Ayurvedic Kavirajas, he felt their pulses. Without much ado, he went to his dispensary, came back with a big bag of what the lady referred to as pellets. And he gave them to her and said, you have to take one of these every morning on an empty stomach without food for 3 months. And he more or less guaranteed she'd be able to have children. So they went back to the West very excitedly. The first morning, the lady took one of these pellets in her mouth and started chewing it. She realized it was the most bitter thing she had ever put in her mouth. It was just terrible. But somehow or other, they were anxious to have children, so she toughed it out, as they say, and did that every morning for 2.5 months. And of course they were monthly performing the sacred Govardhan Samskara Yajna to attract an auspicious child to their family. But after 2.5 months, nothing had happened. And she just couldn't take it anymore. She stopped taking the medicine. So on their next trip to India, they decided, well, let's go and see the Kaviraj again. Maybe that medicine didn't work for us, but maybe he's got something else for us. So they went and saw him. And he was quite surprised when he saw them without a little bundle of joy in their arms. And he said, how long did you take the medicine for? And she said, 2.5 months. I couldn't take it anymore. And he got quite upset with them. But he immediately went back to his dispensary, got another big bag of pellets, brought them back, gave them to her and said, I told you to take them for 3 months. You take for 3 months, and again, more or less, I assure you, child will be coming. So Their anxiety to have a child had not diminished, so she went back. And this time she took for the whole 3 months. After 3 months, a short time thereafter, she noticed changes in her body. She went to her doctor, got a pregnancy test, and Haribol, she's having baby. And 9 months later, a beautiful baby boy was born. And 2 years later, she had a beautiful baby girl. Haribol. So, of course, I'm sure you know where I'm going with the moral of the story. You have to stick with the medicine. Keep taking it. Even it's bitter in the beginning. And we can see how coming to Krishna consciousness even has very wonderful family benefits if we stick to the process and continue taking. So, and of course that is the mercy again of an Acharya like Srila Prabhupada. I heard a nice story I've never heard until recently, just the other day. Two of Prabhupada's sannyasi disciples, Tamal Krishna Goswami and Giriraj Swami, this is many years ago, were walking. Some of you may know Giriraj Maharaj has an ashram near Santa Barbara, Carpinteria, and in California. And some decades ago now, he was walking there on a cliff top with Tamal Krishna Goswami, and they were looking down on the beach below, and there was one man throwing a stick out into the turbulent ocean waves, and his pet dog was swimming out with some difficulty, fetching the stick and swimming back and dropping the stick at his master's feet, and then the master would throw the stick out again. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj made the comparison. He said, that's just like us and Prabhupada. We're actually acting against our nature in many ways. But we're doing it out of profound love and gratitude to Srila Prabhupada. He's giving us all these different tasks to perform to spread Mahaprabhu's sublime teachings all over the world. And we're very gladly, very enthusiastically doing it, even it may be against our normal nature. So that's love and that's gratitude. Anandamaya Vyasat, which Prabhupada quotes often in his lectures. Krishna is pleasure seeking, and we're his parts and parcels, so we're also seeking pleasure. Or Ananda. And of course in conditioned life, in babyhood for example, the Ananda, which babies experience, is very simple. It's food, breast milk. That is all a newborn is really interested in, and if its body is made reasonably comfortable by its mother and father, that is bliss for a baby. And of course babies grow a little bit and then they start to realize that I'm alive, pranamaya. And they also realize soon afterwards that I have a mind, manamaya. So these different states of consciousness as we mature. And then of course there is Anandamaya, which is the bliss of the soul when reconnected to Krishna. And Prabhupada is talking here a little, Mahaprabhu is the speaker, and Prabhupada is commenting, the fruit of love of Godhead distributed by Caitanya Mahaprabhu is such a great intoxicant. We see that intoxication, it is another layer of covering, which of course many people sadly are addicted to because they're not happy and they want to try and attain happiness by ingesting some form of mind-altering substance. It's a little like if you're sitting in a darkened room, it's already pitch black, you can't even see your hand in front of your face, and somebody comes in and throws a large woolen blanket over the top of you. Here, get covered up a little bit more. That's what intoxication does. We're already covered by the modes of material nature and Bhumi apo nalo vayu kamano buddha evacha ahankara ityame bina prakriti ashtada. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence and false ego. Altogether these 8 comprise my separated material energies, Krishna says. Aparayamitastu anyam prakritin vinime param jiva bhuta mahabaho yayadam dajate jagat. But besides this inferior material energy, O Arjuna, there is a superior spiritual energy, which is all living entities, that's us, the jivas, who are struggling very hard in this material world and are sustaining the universe. So we are that superior spiritual energy, and by devotional service, of course, we gradually realize that. So I was reading yesterday about a wonderful personality. We might finish by telling he's one of the eternal associates of Caitanya Mahaprabhu, and he goes by many names, and we will read about him some distance off in this Caitanya Caritamrita, but he generally goes by the name of Saranya Thakur. Also, he has many other names though, Saranya Murari Das Thakur. And he's an extraordinary personality in line with today's wonderful verses about great associates of Mahaprabhu who had received the mercy of Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Saranya Murari Das Thakur, he is described as the 77th branch of the Caitanya tree. And it's not his appearance day and it's not his disappearance day, but we're going to talk about him anyway, a little bit, because it's very wonderful to hear. And it's said that he only had one arm. So the statement single-handed comes into focus here. He only had one arm. But nonetheless, he would go out all day. He would go out every day and collect from the forest fruits and flowers and firewood, and he would worship very lovingly his deity Subhrata Gopinath most of the day. And he lived in Mamgachi, which is a very sacred place. Those of us who have done the Navadvip Mandal Parikrama will have visited Mamgachi on the island of Madhumadvip in Navadvip Dham. And many exalted associates of Mahaprabhu lived in Mamgachi, such as, or were born there, either way, such as Vasudeva and Mukunda Datta, and Vrindavan Das Thakur were also residents of Mamgachi. So, and in front of his little ashram there was a large bakula tree, but it was dying. And one time Caitanya Mahaprabhu passed by and saw Saranya Murari Das Thakur and said, "Saranya, your bakula tree is dying." And Saranya Thakur said, "I know, Goshai. He will only stay if he receives your mercy." So Caitanya Mahaprabhu embraced that tree. And from that point on, that tree regenerated wonderfully with lots of leaves and flowers and so on. And it's still existing today, even though, interestingly, those who have seen that tree, it appears to be completely hollow inside. So how is it surviving? By the mercy of Caitanya Mahaprabhu. So Mahaprabhu was always encouraging Saranya Thakur to accept some disciples because he was eminently qualified. But Saranya Thakur, like many saintly persons, was feeling himself most unqualified. So he steadfastly refused, had even taken a vow never to accept any disciples. But on one occasion, he dreamt, Lord Caitanya advised him, you really need to take some disciples. So he resolved the next morning, the first person he met, he'd initiate. So he was down at the river Ganga taking his morning bath, and something bumped into his lotus foot, and it was a corpse. A young boy had passed away in a village upstream the day before, and as is the custom in Vedic civilization, children are generally not cremated. Sometimes they're buried, but often they're put on a raft of banana logs and they're floated down the Ganga and out to sea. So this is exactly what had happened to this young boy, and his name was Murari. So realizing that a dead body had bumped into him, and this being the first person that Saranga Thakur had seen that morning, he wanted to honour his vow. So he asked the body, who are you? And the body came to life. And the boy said, my name is Murari. I died yesterday. So this is miraculous. Somehow or other the boy, by the inconceivable potency of Krishna's pure devotee, his life came back. So Saranya Thakur took this lad back to his ashram, and word spread, and he stayed there, and word spread after some days back to his village upstream. Some people heard and related to the parents that your son's alive. He's staying at the ashram of Saranya Thakur. So the parents came there and said, son, they were so overjoyed, our son, you're alive. Please come home. And the boy said, no, I'm not coming home. I will remain in the service of he who has given me life again, for I am indebted to him. That was Murari's realization, and he stayed, and he served his Guru Maharaj. So very wonderful personality, Saranya Thakur. He is described in Gauragana Deshdipika as Nandi Mukhi Gopi in Adi-lila. He's the sister of Madhu Mangala, and they're both the son and daughter of Sandipani Muni. It said he was so much transcendental and aloof from the bodily concept of life that he could stay in the water of the Ganga for 2 or 3 days and feel absolutely no inconvenience. Further to that, he would sometimes go into the forest, or sometimes when he was in the forest collecting fruits and flowers and firewood, he would encounter tigers, and he would slap them on the cheeks with no reaction. And he would also play with poisonous snakes. So that's a little bit about Saranya Murari Das Thakur. So I hope it ties in somehow or other, but would anyone like to ask a question or make a comment? Or make a correction? Jai, you're in hurry, prabhu.
Just wondering about these symptoms of ecstatic love, and maybe you can talk a little bit about how it's important not to imitate, or how do we know if we're imitating or if we're actually experiencing something, or if it's just some material emotion or something like that.
Well, first and foremost, we shouldn't imitate. If we do feel a little happiness in devotional service from time to time, we should be very grateful to Krishna for that. It's said that advanced devotees never exhibit publicly their ecstatic symptoms. They only ever do that in the company if they are feeling some ecstasy of another very exalted Vaishnava who will understand their happiness. It's a little bit like Mahaprabhu's described like a golden volcano. He could not check his spiritual ecstasies. They would erupt constantly. But his followers, they are very cautious, and because otherwise it cheapens and the common mass of people cannot understand and will actually commit offences. So in that way, devotees are very cautious, and so that's just some thoughts in that regard. And Prabhupada set the tone, the tenor, the mood for our society by himself. On very rare occasions, Prabhupada could not contain his spiritual ecstasies, and they would erupt, so to speak. So he's our Acharya, and we follow very closely in his footsteps. Hope that's of some value. Anything else? Yes.
Just in that regard, I think some devotees might have been Vrindavan. There was some local Indian visitors, or at least one man, rolling around the ground during Kirtan, apparently in ecstasy. So that was reported to Prabhupada, and he said, "So what did you do?" And the devotees, "Well, we weren't sure, is it genuine? Is he making out? We weren't sure what to do." And Prabhupada said, "So you give them a good kick. If they don't respond, you know it's genuine."
Yes, yeah. Yes. Of course, that was the foremost part of the mission of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and his father Bhaktivinoda Thakur, because there was Sahajiya means one who takes everything very cheaply. So Krishna is not so cheap. He doesn't want to be taken cheaply, and so we follow in that beautiful line. Anything else this morning? Yes, Shanti Prabhu has a comment.
Sees the jubilation and worship with his life to expand more and more these activities. That enthusiasm, that can't be curbed, that can't be caught off. It's an overexpression that is the question, yes, isn't it?
An overexpression.
Jubilation, and you normally feel glum and down, but if you feel up and alive, then there's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely not, and we should be. Many of us have taken up the practice of Krishna consciousness by attending Sunday feasts and becoming engladdened and enthusiastic and jolly, whereas before we weren't. And Prabhupada's famous comment that hippies have become happies. So, absolutely, and it's wonderful to be part of a devotee community where there is enthusiasm for bhakti and enthusiasm to actually share our good fortune with others, manifest, as we've said many times, the modern day pastimes of Caitanya Mahaprabhu to the world in whatever ways we're allowed to do. And Chaitanya Vaishnavism is very wonderful, it's very mysterious, it's very blissful, it's also very wonderful. There are many wonderful aspects to appreciate. We sometimes get asked the question, is Chaitanya Vaishnavism, Gaudiya Vaishnavism, monotheistic or polytheistic? Because we read that Lord Advaita Acharya, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was worshipping his Shalagram Shila, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to induce Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to appear. And that's pretty far out. So one could hear all that. But of course, we are worshipping Sri Krishna, Bhagavan Sri Krishna. One of the wonderful verses of Srimad Bhagavatam that the Gaudiya Vaishnavas hang our hats on, so to speak, or our beanies. Iti chamsa kalopum sam krishnastu bhagavan swayam indrali bakalam lokam madayanti yuga yuga. Of all the lists of incarnations submitted herewith, Vyasadeva says, Krishna is the supreme because none can excel him. He appears whenever there is a disturbance caused by the enemies of Indra. So, just like there is one original candle which lights many other candles and they all burn as brilliantly as the original, but still there was one original candle, Swayam Bhagavan Sri Krishna. So that Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, that is what Caitanya Mahaprabhu has come to present. And one of the first books, and we've been fortunate somehow or other to purchase or to borrow, and now there are many. But the first book that was actually written about the earliest days of Prabhupada's coming to America, especially in New York and San Francisco, was Hayagriva Prabhu's wonderful book, Hare Krishna Explosion. And there's one incident there where in San Francisco, 1967, there was one young man coming to the temple. He, unlike most of the other devotees who were coming from the alternative hippie community, this young man was regular, straight up young fellow, had a job, was married, but he just became caught up in the bliss of the Sankirtan movement. Prabhupada was there lecturing. This young man was dancing ecstatically in Kirtan. But there was a problem. There's always problems in this material world. So his problem was that his wife, she was not at all favourable to Krishna consciousness. She was downright hostile. And ultimately she arranged for both of them to move back to some godforsaken town in the Midwest of the US where there was certainly not a branch of ISKCON, because there were only two, New York and San Francisco. So he came to the devotees and he came to Hayagriva and said, look, this is, I have to, what can I do? I have to leave. And he was very unhappy. So this was relayed to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said he will remember these as the happiest days of his life. So hopefully he made contact with devotees in whatever that godforsaken town was in the Midwest. Devotees might have gone there. Just as Jamuna Devi always would relate that she was brought up in a small town in the Midwest, Bose, Idaho. That was where Jamuna Devi came from. But she thought it was the most miraculous thing that she ended up in San Francisco, met Prabhupada, and her life was changed. So I better stop there, everyone. Thank you so much. Jai Sri Caitanya Caritamrita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
You can ask another question until we're running a little bit behind you.
Oh, okay. All right, Prabhu. Thank you. Thank you, Vasishtha. Yes, Bridget, you want the microphone?
Just in relation to the question that Adi-lila asked.
Yes.
I just see, when we read, we can see that bhakti is a process, a gradual process, and a scientific process. In the same way that there are different stages, right? So you don't jump. You can say, oh, I'm still attached to material things. I'm not following the principles, but I see the baby, and I'm crying, and I'm trembling, and this and that. I've heard sometimes new people saying things like that, but at the same time, we can stop doing certain activities. So the way I see it is in the same way that Ashtanga Yoga is a ladder as well. You know, you have yamas and niyamas, which are regulations and rules. You don't do this, you don't do that, and then you go further, you know, like that. So you can't say I'm in samadhi but I'm not clean or I'm not following the principles. So it's a science, right? So there is a gradual. It's not just that. Yes, we accept that people are happy to be chanting and dancing in a kirtan, but you cannot accept that a person is having static symptoms, you know, love for God, if they're not doing the whole process. I think it is Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, Adi-lila, and then you go to bath and pray. It's not like you arrive here, you don't follow anything, and then, wow, I'm crying when I see the baby. So I think it's important to emphasize that this is a process, and if you have attachments to material things, and you're not controlling your senses properly, you're crying in front of the babies, it's just like mental concoction. So that's the way I see it.
No, very good point. That's a very good point, Roger. Thank you. Yes, you're absolutely right. And that verse is, as you said, Ado Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangasta Bhajana Kriya Tato Anartha Nivriti Shat Tato Nista Ruchis Tato. And that's only half the verse. The second half of the verse, as you said, describes bhava and prema. But it's a wonderful progression, a great adventure. Shraddha, when one has a little bit of faith, then one associates with like-minded persons. Ado Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangha. One takes initiation from a bona fide spiritual master one has developed faith in, begins the process of devotional service. Tata Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, Tato Anartha, and then Anartha Nivriti, which means all the unwanted bad habits one gradually gives up. As one gets a higher and higher taste, one can easily let go of the insignificant, paltry pleasures of this body. And one develops nishta, or firm faith, in Krishna. Ado Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangasta Bhajana Kriya Tato Nista Ruchis, and one gets a taste, ruchi. So, and then with that taste, one can gradually experience, the higher and higher. So, until one comes to that level, then we follow Vaidhi Bhakti rules and regulations. The two paths are there. Spontaneous love may be something we aspire for, but in the meanwhile we follow the rules of sadhana bhakti. Yes, very nice point. Thank you. And how's it looking out there versus stress? Anyone else like to make a quick comment or a question? That's all right. Our Prabhu's coming here. Shanti's always got nice comments. As does Manibandha Gopal. Yes?
People can have a shadow attachment, and it's not the full quid. And that, it's not necessarily a linear thing. It can be a spiral thing, and you can be a perfectly self-realized prashadana. You develop abstractions about that, but you might be perfect form when it comes to following principles, something like that.
Good point. Yes. Yeah, very nice.
So what is that written? What is it for? That you can be at the initial stage and still have love for God. What is that written? Oh, you have love for Krishna, that means you still be that? Oh wow.
There's hope for all of us.
I've never seen a quote like that anywhere.
Shanti, shadow attachment. So, yes. From the Shanti Purana. So, yeah. Prabhu, did you want to say something?
You were saying that taking intoxication can be like you're in a dark room with material existence and you put a blanket. But some people they have the experience that can open them up to spiritual life, all these things. So How does that fit?
All right. Well, I always liked Prabhupada's response to a young man who came to 26 Second Avenue and heard Prabhupada say that, well, it was just saying that you don't need to take this LSD or whatever. So the young man questioned Prabhupada after him and said, "How, Swamiji, can you say that chanting Hare Krishna is better than LSD when you yourself have never taken LSD?" And Prabhupada said, "It is true that I personally have never taken this LSD, but all of my disciples have, and they've told me that chanting Hare Krishna is better than LSD." Wonderful logic. So by hearing, one doesn't necessarily have to indulge in the activity to learn that it's not good or that there's something better. One can hear like that. Yes, and of course was, as it still is, the intoxication troubles which come either by being addicted to some harmful substance, which can be soul-destroying and life-destroying. We all know many people are rotting in prison because they became addicted to really nasty substances. And yes, actually Krishna consciousness can actually save our lives, even our material lives. Welcome. All right. Okay, so we'll stop now. Vasistasta Prabhu Jai. Again, Sri Caitanya Caritamrita ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.